and I had about 4 or 5 workers in front of me, essentially all needing to be paid.
What were your fears at that point? What was the concern?
That's when definitely the difficulty started.
Okay, hello and welcome to the Director First podcast with Chris Worden. Today we are going to be having a chat with a recent client of ours to help you guys out there understand what happened, what liquidation was like, and how, more importantly, it feels now. And we're going to go into like challenges. I want this to be warts and all. And it's to try and help educate people out there who are going through this. They're having kittens. They cannot pay the bills on time. They're frightened to death of what insolvency means and how they're going to get through it. So, Hussein, thank you so much for coming and joining us on the podcast. Can you sort of briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business, what it was before liquidation?
Yeah, firstly, thank you very much for having me on, Chris. Much appreciated. So the business was kind of in the social housing space, operating for about a year or so. And at the beginning, there was that sort of natural excitement in regards to setting off, getting clients in, winning business, invoices, these kind of things. But I think very quickly we realized that essentially the turning point being when we took on staff, essentially on PAYE. That's when really the challenges started to come into play in regards to obviously meeting those obligations and demands versus the amount of actual money that was coming into the business, and essentially being a huge disconnect between those two things, which I'm sure we'll sort of unpack in this sort of episode. But yeah, that was pretty much the gist of it. In social housing, doing decently well, getting off the ground. The getting off the ground stage actually wasn't too much of a problem. It was fairly stable. But I think as soon as we very shortly after employing people, getting to that stage is when we started to encounter some of the issues, which obviously led to where we're at today.
And that's very common. It's like, I can liken it to my experiences. Whenever I've been a one-man band, it's quite easy to manage. It's like I'm
Mhm.
going out there, I can win work. I'm doing the invoicing, I'm doing the credit control, I'm doing the doing, and then you've got to move up that level and bring people in. And not only is that an extra expense to the business, but at the start it can be a real drain on the time of an owner operator, because we've got to train the people that we've got to bring in. And I don't know about you, but I mean, it's like whenever we bring a new member of team here at Director First, there's always some teething problems.
Absolutely.
There's mistakes that happen. It's like you've got to get them into the business. You normally, I mean, if we get somebody who's worked for another insolvency firm, we've got to try and retrain them, like really,
Mhm.
because we want them to be very customer focused and like, have some, empathy, really, to try and settle the director down a little bit, or that's a hope. So I understand, sometimes when we grow, it puts additional stresses that we're not quite ready for. What were the first signs that made you think, well, actually, I might need to, you know, put this business through an insolvency process?
Mm. Yeah, I think the one moment that stands out to me, never forget it, and actually better for it, is essentially when we had a contract come in that we felt would be the one that would be able to cover some of the wages, if not all the wages. When the actual sort of invoice amount came in, it's probably about £2,000, £3,000, if that even. And I had about 4 or 5 workers in front of me, essentially all needing to be paid from that 2 or 3 thousands, not even probably including myself and any of the business costs. So straight away there was a massive kind of shock element there of, well, like I said before, disconnect between, what I mentioned. And I remember it clearly where one worker in particular, his mood kind of changed, rightly so, I'd say. Sort of then getting down the road of refusing to work for the day until wages were paid, these kind of things. And that's when definitely the difficulty started. This was throughout a summer period, and we tried to obviously battle through and clear off what we could, and we were battling through, paying what we could here and there, um, until we got to about, I would say, towards the end of last year. I'd recently come back from abroad, just for family reasons. Came back, and literally it must have been the couple of days later, if that even. Took the car to the garage to get an MOT done. Was off to meet one of the other sort of people that work with us, and I get a phone call from the HMRC on the business line saying essentially I'm outside, and I was obviously confused. What do you mean you're outside? We sent you a letter. Didn't receive the letter. Genuinely, I was abroad up until about probably 3 days ago. Didn't receive the letter. What's this about? Essentially, this was HMRC turning up to the office that we had at the time, after having sent a letter, essentially opening an investigation for national living wage payments. Now, obviously, probably not a coincidence considering what was happening, the months prior to that. That process then obviously was very shocking and distressing. Shortly after, I then had to, even as the director of the company, had decided to take a full-time job, and actually take on another job separate to that as well. So I was probably doing about 3, 4 jobs at the same time, with the hope of anything the business can generate stays in the business to pay off creditors. And obviously anything I make from my own salary, whatever's left over, then obviously I can use that to support myself and my family. Um, that HMRC investigation went on for, I think, definitely over 6 months, around 6 months or more. A very lengthy, draining, worrying process, because you're dealt with very bluntly, I would say. Yeah, you're dealt with. It can be something along the lines of, Mr. Hussein, we require this information from you, which you then respond in the evenings, nighttime, send in the information, and you won't hear back from them for another month or so. So you're
Mm,
obviously worried, thinking, okay, what's going on? Has it come to an end? Has it not? All of a sudden, you get another very blunt email. Dear Mr. Hussein, are required to have a phone call with you next week. And obviously, I'm working a full-time job, so having to step out of the office to try and facilitate that call. It's so many different areas of your life that it affects.
mm,
Essentially, in the end, which was the reason which pushed us towards the liquidation, going back to your question, Chris, was essentially them finding an underpayment, by the letter of the law, clearly because the company wasn't generating enough income to pay workers. Definitely not a case of withholding money or anything sinister like that. But by the letter of the law, them having to essentially hit us with a 200% penalty,
mm.
which took the overall arrears a company had, if you include rent and things like that, close to about £40,000, which was just, it was just the straw that broke the camel's back. To I then reached out to a financial advisor who recommended me to his contact in terms of liquidation. Nice chap, explained the situation, was very nice. In the end, look, he said, look, I'm going to ask you for a little bit of money. Absolutely fine. Everybody's got a job to do, and I respect it. But he was a bit, I would say, a bit too rigid in regards to accommodating the situation, especially what I was in. He kind of wanted a bit of a black and white. You kind of got to, either you're going to do it this way or it's not going to go ahead. Which then, I think by this point or around this point, I was watching a lot of your content anyway, Chris, and I really liked it. And I know you get this a lot, and rightly so, rightly and honestly so. It's, you basically just put it into plain English for people. This is the situation. This is how it can go wrong. Seek help. Doesn't necessarily mean everything's going to be okay, but you're going to have to, face your situation. So don't run away from it.
Mm.
Sunday evening at one point, I must have just gone onto your website, booked in. The next morning, I was on a call with your brother Shaun, the other funny looking bald chap with specs who claims that he's the better looking one. I thought I'd put that in
Debatable, very debatable.
there. So absolute gentleman he is. Very helpful. Again, spoke plain English. Then obviously got through to Emily. Again, absolute gem of a woman. Very helpful. And yeah, it was actually a very underwhelming process after that, and I'm sure you probably get that a lot as well. it's not this big grand event that you think, okay, you're gonna take a jump. One day you're in, you're in the war zone. The next day you're not. It's nothing as dramatic as that.
Mm.
It's very underwhelming, but I wouldn't say it's any less satisfying when once it does go ahead.
I mean, when you mentioned the straw that broke the camel's back. What were your fears at that point? What was the concerns? What were the things that you were like, I don't know if they were keeping you up at night, but the things that
Mm.
were sort of
Yeah, yeah,
making you pause.
yeah. Look, it's I think I'm by nature that similar to yourself as well in the sense of I want to by default fight through a situation. I'm a fighter in that sense. I'm a very calm personality, people tell me. So whatever the situation is, I don't get phased often or a lot. So if it happens, I'll maybe shrug my shoulders and just keep going. I have that kind of roll the sleeves up, get stuck in mentality. So hence why I was kind of doing the 3, 4 jobs on the go, just really not even thinking too much. But look, this is the situation I'm in. Just graft, try and get through this, over the line. But in terms of if you when when your head hits the pillow and when reality kind of kicks in, you do feel a sense of it could be fear, panic. You have a wife to look after. You have your reputation, family, community. You don't want to be seen as a failure. You don't want to be seen as you've been wasting your time. Everything you've built up until that point in terms of clients. Some of the creditors were clients and friends as well. So there's obviously could be an element of embarrassment there. So it's a huge amount of different emotions, and some that are long term, some that are short term. I think anxiety, to be completely honest with you, whenever the email would come in from the chap from HMRC, you do get a sense of almost, well, what's next? What do you want now?
Mm,
You feel as though you've given everything, and it's like, well, no, it's never enough. You need a bit extra, a bit extra. And I think the sad part is, I think when it came to the final phone call where he essentially gave the verdict to say, look, this is the situation, 200% penalty, etc. In a very strange way, that was almost a sense of relief because it's like, okay, well, that process is over now. This is what the situation is.
mm.
We kind of at least I don't have to fear any more emails and letters coming through now, if that makes sense. But
Gives you a bit
definitely,
of clarity, yeah.
yeah, and I think it affects most areas of your life. And I wanted to mention this. I said this to a friend before, obviously, I knew I was coming on that the sort of wording of limited liability. I think that can give a lot of directors, and I've gone through this, a false sense of security, because when the situation does go left, it's essentially full liability. And I don't mean that from a technical company perspective, but I mean that from you're the director who's responsible for that vehicle of the company. So naturally, you're the person who they're going to come to. So in that situation, it's you have to deal with it. You can't run away from it. You can try and run away from it, but it's not going to do you any favors.
Mm. I think when it comes to personal liability, you're right. It's like limited company means I can't be held personally liable for company debts. And, in principle, limited liability means that you are not the company. But
Mm,
more and more, I mean, this is going out in 2024, you're seeing directors be made personally responsible for certain elements of company debts. And that could be the most basic things is overdrawn loan accounts,
mm,
bounce back loan, misappropriation.
mm,
The HMRC now, when you're seeing large HMRC arrears being built up repeatedly, you're seeing HMRC issue personal liability notices.
mm,
Personal guarantees. If someone signed a personal guarantee in their business, defaults on that loan or that piece of equipment or whatever it is, they will
mhm,
be in the firing line personally. And people have got to be aware that's really what we do here is go, listen, pause for a second. If you hit the button on this, this is what's coming down the road. And
mm,
so many directors that I've seen over the years, and this is where we saw the gap in the market. So many directors were just so focused on what will this cost. I'm in a rush. I need to get this done now. They'll
mm,
almost do anything the first person they speak to says, and they think their problem has gone away. And then
mm,
a liquidator is appointed, and before you know it, that director's being hounded for directors' loans, preference payments, and a 4 grand liquidation turns into 100 grand liquidation.
yeah,
I,
yeah,
what I,
yeah,
that's not the case on this. on this job, but it happens. There's
Yeah.
not a day that goes by that someone in my team speaks to somebody who is being pursued by an insolvency practitioner. What people don't realize is that insolvency practitioners just doing their job. My
Mm, mm,
feelings on most of these inquiries I get is, well, they should have known that you had this problem at the very start because I can see it
mm,
clear as day. Why
yeah.
didn't they mention it? And the cynic in me says they didn't mention it because they didn't want to spoil the easy job that was going on, and obviously there's an opportunity to bill more fees if these problems come out down the line. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you're right.
it's always it's a misconception that you can't be made personally liable because people can.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, yeah, I think with this process as well. I mean, I had a chat with one of my financial advisors just the other week, and he kind of a very experienced man, and he kind of asked me, okay, you've gone through this process now. You tell me what you've learned, and I will tell you if you've actually learned. So I said about
Yes.
3 or 4 points, and he was like, yes, you've got it. You've definitely learned your lesson now. And I say lesson, I don't mean necessarily that things were, intentionally done wrong, and probably 9 times out of 10 they're not. But it's just, I would say, what I would call kind of schoolboy errors. But also, and obviously any of the listeners listening to this, especially if you're new in business and you're a new director, I mean, a lot of us have, for example, maybe not earned our stripes to be a director. And what I mean by that is, for example, doing 15, 20, 30 years or whatever it is in this particular sector. But we decide to add value and paying 12 or 50 pounds to company's house, and all of a sudden you've skipped 20 years up the ladder. But what comes with that, I think, is obviously a lot of excitement, but also a sense of naivety of not knowing fully what your responsibilities as a director are. It can feel good, especially at the start. Oh, he's a director, that sort of title. But there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that.
Mm.
And I think this process really exposes that, especially if it goes, and there's a lot of money involved and whatnot. It really exposes what level of responsibility and understanding of that responsibility the director has, and that's one of the things that I've learned and really benefited from as well going forward.
And so many people they're not aware of that. Like when you go to work and you set a company up, initially you're responsible for making a profit,
Mm,
distributing those profits to the shareholders. That's why we all go to work.
mm,
But if a company becomes insolvent, so that they're unable to pay their debts when they're due, or their liabilities are more than their assets, the role and responsibility of the director changes like night and day. And what people don't realize is from that point of insolvency, you're duty bound to minimize damage to creditors.
mhm,
Like literally, that's where the spotlight is this? I mean, there was a big case. It happened this year, but the directors of British Home Stores, they have been made personally liable for tens of millions of pounds of company debt because a judgment has come out and said, right, well, actually, you since that point of you becoming insolvent, you've racked up this amount of debt. Therefore, we are making you personally liable.
mm,
And really, what a director should be doing, like yourself, is taking swift action the minute that they start to see that problem, because the earlier they take advice, the better outcome. I mean, what were the key lessons for you in this, Hussein? Looking back, what did you take from it? What were the learnings? What would you do differently next time?
yeah, very good question. As many, I mean, going through this process, you can feel like you can write a bloody book on these learnings, but just some of the ones off top of my head. One is kind of like the chicken and egg debate in the sense of, do you hire workers in anticipation of contracts coming in and increased revenue so that they can do that work and then obviously be paid from that? Or do you get the contracts in first and then hire the workers? And I find obviously now the safest way is to get the contracts in first. Yes, as a business, there might be that struggle of, resources and stretching so that you can get to a stage where you can bring workers in and obviously pay them correctly. That's definitely one. The second one I'd say is, God forbid, if a situation like this happens again, I know the actions I'm taking the next day. And actually more practically, because I know a lot of probably the viewers of this are just normal people like myself who are just trying to survive each day in this very tough market, trying to make a profit, even if it's a small one, just to be comfortable and stable. Um, it's something sometimes as simple, maybe easier said than done, but maybe just even setting aside some money in preparation as a rainy day, because you never know what can happen. And a lot of times, like I remember when you described your situation, it was a change in the market which basically finished you off overnight. Now, having a little pot set aside ready for liquidation if needs be is probably not a bad idea. At least you're preparing for it. Then, as they say, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So it's basically just coming down to like a risk management perspective of the business as well, thinking in different ways. But just top of my head, those are the two big learnings that I've taken. And the third one I would say is just keep on top of everything. Know your responsibilities. Keep on top of everything. Always double check things, and just make sure you're keeping on top of everything. I think in a basic level, that's a huge part of a director's responsibility because obviously you're liable.
I think what one thing that's come out there, and I noted it down here, is like the capitalization of a business. And in simple terms, it's like what cash has your business got? And
Mm,
it's trying to preserve that capital. Because if you'd let me put it to you, if you'd have raised some capital and you had funds and
mm,
you then employ and you get the contractors on, money is going to make most things easier in a business. It's not going to solve all the problems, but
mm-hmm,
if you've got a prudent reserve, like for me, I have been in business where I'm living off credit cards personally to
mm,
survive. Like literally,
mm,
I remember doing that. I remember like the bit my previous business mate didn't have enough money to pay me, and I'm putting bloody groceries on a credit card.
mm,
I'm increasing. I'm living in an overdraft.
mm.
Um, and that is stressful.
Yeah,
Um,
and I can relate to that, Chris. I think
I had a
just
ponytail when that were happening, and then it just all got lost. But seriously, and I felt I faced challenges in business when I've got a war chest, and I
mm,
sleep better with a war chest. Okay, the challenges are still the challenges. Life is
mm,
going to show up. So I implore people, whether regardless of the size of business, try and have at least 3 months of operating costs,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
just
mm-hmm.
in a slush fund. So if it all goes to hell in a handbasket, you can survive 12 weeks.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
more, that if you can save more, have more. But it's always interesting to see what people take out of this. And listen, what made you work with us specifically? You've said some kind words about me, Sean, and Emily, but what? Because there's loads of firms out there, and
Mm.
you mentioned you saw us on social media. So if you respond to anything that we promote on social media, you're also going to get hammered by everyone else in my sector. So, what made you choose the couple of funny-looking bold chaps from up north?
I think the again when the reality kicks in terms of you're presented with the situation that essentially the difficulties financially, etc. You then naturally start to research, and I think very quickly people come across the sort of dissolving a company route, but clearly realizing that that's not it's not really the correct solution, to be honest with you. So what are the other options? And I think then when I spoke to somebody in the sort of the financial sector, was then the route or option of liquidation. But at that time, when somebody says to you, it's going to cost you, closer to 5 grand or whatever it is, you're in such a rut. 5 grand feels like 5 years away, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. It seems like such a long time. Where am I going to get 5 grand from? I haven't got £500 to pay people at the moment.
Hmm.
That kind of thing. So, but then I think naturally, as part of that research process, in my particular case, I must have just gone on YouTube. It was YouTube that I found you guys on, and just typed
Hmm.
in liquidation. I didn't at this point. I wasn't maybe too familiar with insolvency and IP and these kind of terms I am now. But at that time, liquidation was known to me. So I must have just typed in liquidate business UK or something along something simple like that into YouTube. and your stuff came up, and I just like the content. There's no, and Chrissy, sometimes it's just basic things like it's a serious situation. You know, you don't have any kind of fancy music in the background and all this kind of childish kind of stuff, and make it all sort of fun. It's a serious thing. Do you know what I mean? And you just
Mm.
like you came across as a straight talker, and I really resonate with that. Just saying it as it is, speaking in plain English, breaking these terms down, doing loads of things. You know, I learned so much about overdrawn directed loan accounts. You know, the three insolvency tests, all of these things that you explain. But I think it must have been maybe a second meeting that I had with the financial person, which was then I spoke to that first IP, who like I said was a nice fella. I wish him well. Nothing wrong in that regard, but it was just he was just a little bit rigid in regards to him trying to help us out in this very specific situation we was in. And I think after that, maybe let's say that was on a Wednesday. I think by the same Sunday, I'd basically just gone online Sunday evening, Sunday night, whatever it was. Director first, your guys' website, booked in a consultation call, and the next literally the next morning, early at 8:30, 9 o'clock, if that even, whatever it was, I was on the call with Shaun, and I haven't looked back since.
I appreciate, listen, I appreciate you putting your faith in us. What was, right, look, obviously, I like to ask everybody this.
Yeah,
The liquidation process scares the life out of people. What was that liquidation process for you? What happened? Tell me, warts and all,
yeah,
walk us through it.
yeah. No, it's so interesting. The reason I'm sort of smiling and laughing to myself is because the questions and the fear and whatnot that people might have, I was there not long ago. So hopefully anybody listening, they can kind of benefit from somebody who's basically feeling the same as them and has gone through it now and can tell you what it's like. During the summer of this year, obviously, I was still in the process of building enough funds to be able to, you know, pay the relevant fees and so on and so forth. But during that time, I was obviously listening to a lot of the podcast, this podcast with yourself, you get people on. And one of the things I remember, I think yourself saying was there's a lot of paperwork involved. And my goodness, there is. It's not difficult paperwork at all. Not by any stretch of the imaginations. A lot of this stuff, accountants and stuff, will help you with. It's more of a. I'll tell you what the difficulty I found, Chris, was uh, not difficulty, but challenge was running the business and obviously trying to stabilize and whatnot, and at the same time having to squeeze in time to get obviously the paperwork complete and sent in as quickly as possible. That was a kind of challenge for me. But you get walked through everything. Honestly, many times if I was unsure about something, I'd call Shaun. I'd try to call yourself. Um, even if you was on holiday, which I know you make a mention of, your missus doesn't like. So apologies if I ever did that to you.
I wish people had stopped bloody saying on this podcast that I take calls on holiday because my missus might watch it. And when I'm sneaking off with a baby for a walk, she knows that I'm not trying to get her to sleep.
Well, this is unfortunately this is just the situation, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
like for example, with Shaun, you know, call him at whatever time, 8 o'clock, whatever. Even if he can't call me back straight away, he'll call me back as soon as, and
No,
it's just
listen,
basically anything.
we do. We're the real deal. We're here for you.
Yeah, 100%.
Because we know how hard
So
it is, you know, like
yeah. I mean, look,
it's almost out of
it's
business hours. They're the
yeah,
toughest times.
they're the toughest times. And if regards to the paperwork, if there
Sorry,
was anything I
Hussein,
was
I've
unsure about,
lost you.
sorry, can you hear me now?
Is uh is
Is it a bit better now?
your connection dropped out, mate?
Is it a bit better now? Is it a bit better now?
Let me just pause this. I've just do you know what? I must have put you on blooming mute. Yeah. I'm not
For how
I'm
long? We
not
don't know.
I don't know. No, I stopped when I couldn't hear you. So we were talking about what aspects you found most helpful about us. So listen,
Ye-
with regards to you know, another business owner, if you were speaking to another business owner that was going through these challenges, what
mhm.
is the advice that you'd give them?
Yeah, very good question. I think similar to what I mentioned before, in the sense of, look, if you've got a fund or whatever you want to call it ready for this process, you've got the money. Do not waste a day. Honestly, do not waste a day. Get in touch with these guys. I've been through it myself. They walk you through everything. The partner that I was working with, Molly, absolute gem.
Yeah, she's
Um,
lovely, isn't she?
yeah, just takes it on. Any problems you have, any questions, concerns, you've got someone to talk to. You don't feel any more that you're on your own. Naturally, there'll always be those worries and concerns. What if this happens? What if somebody objects? What if HMRC come back? What if this, that, the other, and so on and so forth? There's an answer for pretty much everything, to be honest with you. It's very rare that whatever you're going through is going to be the first case the director first or the partners have gone through. So yeah, without any hesitation, just get it done. And once it's done, honestly, the relief, you could just like you said to me, Chris, at the time, you can just get on with your life now.
Yeah.
Mine. Would you say, Chris, was a bit of a pre-pack?
Well, yours was a liquidation, but and actually it's an important point. This one of the things that you wanted to do was use a similar trading style.
Yes.
Now, there's a lot of misinformation out here. So one of the things that we guided you here through is Section 216.
Mhm.
Now, Section 216 means that as a director, if you liquidate a business, you cannot use the same or a similar name for a period of 5 years
Mhm.
unless you follow a certain process. Well, there's actually three ways that you can overcome that. The first way is you've already got a company that's trading with a similar
Mhm.
name, or you apply to the courts. Applying to the courts can be quite expensive. So, what
Mhm.
we assisted you with is you bought the name, £500 plus VAT on the
Mhm.
date of liquidation. And then what you are meant to do is upon appointment of the liquidator, you advertise it in something called the London Gazette, and you essentially email a form to the London Gazette. And once you've submitted the form, you'll receive confirmation. There's a small cost to pay. You
Mhm.
then have got to complete an attachment to creditors. So you write to creditors to tell them what you're doing, okay?
Mhm.
And then you also can send this letter out to people. I mean, we guide them with the letter. And then that circumnavigates this issue. You've informed everybody, you've bought it legally, and you are then allowed to use a same or similar name going forward. So, yeah, that was something additional that we did. And again,
Yeah.
we didn't charge you for that. That is part of our process.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think the important thing there as well is especially if you like in our case, you built up a brand name, which is more important than the actual company name itself, and you want that brand to carry on. That's what's got you business on and so forth. And all of a sudden, it's in front of clients and customers. You don't want to be seen as, okay, we kind of relaunched. Well, what happened? So it's a very important process, and one that I've benefited a lot from. And obviously now, having gone through it. It just gives me the chance now to, go ahead and marketing, social media, website, all of that kind of stuff without the worry or concern of, looking over my shoulder that, well, actually, maybe I've done something wrong. Maybe I didn't let creditors know, so on and so forth. Not the case. Obviously, we let everybody know. We wrote to HMRC as well, paid the fees to the Gazette as well, and yeah, it's a lot of relief now. Like I said at the start, it's a little bit of an underwhelming process because it's not a switch in that regard that you wake up and oh you feel completely different. It's not like that, but it does. It's more like the balloon sort of slowly and subtly and very nicely kind of getting smaller and smaller.
Listen, I want to thank you for joining our podcast, Hussein. Is there
You're most
anything
welcome.
else you would like to share about your experience or about working with Director First before we wrap this up?
Just to say, and like I said to yourself as well, Chris, before that, look, if even if I know anybody who's in that process, I don't have any hesitation to send them one way because I've been through it before as well. And whatever you guys say you do, that's what you end up doing. So, I can attest to that. And yeah, I hope obviously I wish you guys well as well. Obviously, we'll be staying in touch, I'm sure, especially if I'm ever in your neck of the woods. I know you're a big football
100%.
fan as well. But yeah, no, thank you very
Well,
much for having me on. Much appreciated.
Hussein, thank you for your time, my friend. I wish you all the best.
Take care.
Take care. See you soon. Bye bye. Bye bye.